Today on the show, we have Dr. Timothy King, star of the upcoming National Geographic show Mammoth Unearthed, premiering Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Dr. King, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Hey, it's a real honor to be on your show.
Well, thank you very much. Dr. King, if you don't mind, can you give our listeners a little background on yourself and how you came to be involved with the career field that you're actually in?
Well, interestingly enough, I'm an archaeologist. Archaeologists actually work with ancient civilizations and ancient people. Something like a woolly mammoth is actually paleontology. It's looking at ancient animals. However, we have a lot of the same skills. And it ends up about 3 years ago here in California, some artichoke farmers in the town of Castroville, the artichoke capital of the world, some artichoke farmers hit a mammoth with their tractor. There was an Ice Age mammoth, what's called a Columbian mammoth, a North American mammoth, different than a woolly mammoth. They hit a Columbian mammoth with their tractor, and I got the opportunity to be one of the excavators and principal investigators of the excavation. And so mammoths, as of about 3 or 4 years ago, became a fascination and a hobby. And it's now spun out of control a little bit. And the next thing you know, I'm 300 miles above the Arctic Circle in Siberia, looking at the most recent frozen woolly mammoth discovery.
So, how did you get involved with working with Nat Geo on the project we're talking about here, Mammoth Unearthed?
Well, it just ended up being a lot by luck and just being at the right place at the right time. But Nat Geo was interested in finding a couple of scientists who would be tenacious and would be willing to hunt down this mammoth because it was being kept in a secret location. And the show, my co-host is Trevor Valle. Trevor Valle worked at the La Brea Tar Pits labs for years. He is a paleontology genius. The man can look at any bone and tell you exactly what animal it is and where it came from. And I had the opportunity to work with Trevor at the Castroville Mammoth excavations. And so Trevor and I became a logical team to go out there because it took someone from my archaeological experience, it took someone who is rather well-traveled and could manage to negotiate their way through the communities and out there in the middle of, well, the tundra, and as well needing someone who is a really solid paleontologist. And given that we're friends and we've worked together before, it seemed like a likely thing. So we had the fortunate opportunity that National Geographic was interested in effectively following us with a camera crew on this adventure to find the location of where this new mammoth discovery was being kept secret, and that we also then get the opportunity to examine this mammoth and thaw it out and actually look at, well, one of the most intact, if not the most intact, frozen woolly mammoths ever found.
I'm sure it's not as easy as it sounds locating these remains. What types of hurdles do you have to cross or hoops you have to jump through to be able to even search for these creatures? Are there obstacles you face on expeditions like these?
Well, on this one, we weren't the ones who found the mammoth. The mammoth was found by tusk hunters, that is in northeastern Siberia, for the month and a half that is summer. A lot of the small native communities, most of the men will go off into the tundra looking for woolly mammoth remains because right now the tusk ivory, fossil mammoth ivory, has a real high value on the Chinese market. So what happens is we have these guys every summer going out and not just finding tusks, but finding all kinds of Ice Age animals that are sort of coming out of the permafrost. Fortunately, it ends up that one of these teams of tusk hunters came across this whole mammoth carcass still frozen, and they had the wherewithal to tell local scientists of their discovery. And so this was something that was being kept secret, though, because paleontology is kind of competitive, and this was a very valuable thing. So for us, the challenge is to get ourselves into the loop, because we're not Russian scientists, we're not Russian paleontologists. We're two American guys who've effectively showed up into the neighborhood, and we're trying to convince these people to let us work with them. And so we had to deal with tusk hunters, which quite often it's a legally gray business, and they don't want to be known about, and they certainly don't want to be on camera. And then we also had to deal with some of the local politics and making sure that the local paleontologists realized that we're on the up and up. We're not competing with them, and we want to be part of the scientific community around this amazing discovery.
Now, I read where you're trying to isolate the DNA from this mammoth, and visions of Jurassic Park immediately pop up in my mind when I hear that. Is that type of thing a reality? Could that actually be done? Could scientists bring back a mammoth?
There are several parties claiming that they're going to clone a mammoth. I can say this: I know enough about genetics and the state of affairs of what can and cannot be done. In our lifetime, we're not going to see a cloned mammoth. And one of the biggest obstacles is if you're going, suppose we can get the entire genome of the woolly mammoth and we're going to make a clone. You got to have a surrogate mother. And the only living close relative would be the Asian elephant. You'd have to have an Asian elephant mother and a mammoth fetus. The problem is that a woolly mammoth and an Asian elephant are about 5.5 million years apart genetically. Mm-hmm. That is not that far off from attempting to, say, have a human being carry a chimpanzee fetus to full term. It just won't happen. The body can't handle something like that. Mm-hmm. So what I could guess is that in our lifetime, what we might see is something like a mammoth hybrid, where they've taken an Asian elephant fetus, or even just the embryonic cells, and they've put in maybe 10 to 15% mammoth genes. So we'll get kind of like a mammoth light, or really, unfortunately only elephant, or something like that. That is, a certain percentage mammoth. And I would say that's something that could be doable today. And that might be something that we could expect to see perhaps in the next decade, 15 years.
Now, I know you've done a lot of things in your career, but do you consider the mammoth your specialty? I mean, don't you have like a wicked mammoth tattoo?
I do have a wicked mammoth tattoo. It's not my specialty. Oddly enough, I'm an archaeologist. Oddly enough, most of my career has been Mesoamerican archaeology, like out in Mexico with pyramids and hieroglyphs. Mammoths have become, started sort of as a scientific hobby, something that I was very fascinated with. And again, from my co-host, Trevor Valle, working at an expedition with him for 3 years, I've learned a lot about mammoths. So it's now become a hobby that's sort of spiraled out of control. And again, the next thing you know, I realize I'm in 300 miles above the Arctic Circle, just where this has gotten me, Mm-hmm. But it's quite fascinating. And on our show, Mammoth Unearthed, airing this Sunday, you'll see why it's a fascination. When we thaw out the mammoth and you get to see the hair, the skin, the muscle, and you get to see the most intact woolly mammoth found. And it's amazing. It's not rotten, it's not decayed, and the trunk, the most intact mammoth trunk, and it looks like it died yesterday. And it's really moving as a person to just be able to witness something like that, to touch a mammoth.
Outside of being a real-life Indiana Jones, do you have other hobbies or interests that help you wind down, relax, and just get away from it all?
Oddly enough, this is what I do to wind down and get away from it all. I don't have time for, I'm doing a lot of these things, and this is what I enjoy. It's, at least I feel very fortunate to be able to say that it's what do I do to relax? Well, my work. I enjoy doing this kind of stuff, and again, it's been a life so far of seeing a lot of fascinating things.
Now, do you do social media or have a website, or would you like to direct our listeners to a website to learn more about projects you're involved with?
Well, right now for the show, it would be the National Geographic channel has a page, and they have a number of video clips. And as far as I know, before the show, they're going to be putting up a number of photo gallery. Our Castroville Mammoth project does not have an official web page, but right now the mammoth discovery that we found here in Northern California, that would be at the Foothill College website. We have a few pages about it because right now Foothill College, they are the custodians of the mammoth remains, and the mammoth is the Columbian mammoth, not the one that we found in Siberia, but the Columbian mammoth we found here in California. Foothill College has a number of references of what we're doing with that mammoth. As far as what's going on with the mammoth found in Siberia is the Northeastern Federal University, which is in northeastern Siberia. They're the ones that are in possession of this frozen mammoth. They're doing what they can to get as much information out of it as possible. And occasionally they're doing, I would say about every 6 months, they're doing a press release about the new, even more new exciting things they've discovered from, again, one of the most intact mammoth carcasses ever found.
Well, everyone, I want to make sure you tune in to the National Geographic channel this Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time to Mammoth Unearthed. It's part of the Day of Expedition Marathon. Timothy, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, and I can't wait to watch Sunday night.
It's a great adventure, and I'm glad that all of you get to come along on the trip that Trevor and I went along and get to see these amazing discoveries. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Well, thank you for joining us.
The 25th Hour Radio Show.